Hello, Jerry Beal here again, and again to remind you that my YouTube only works for the audio, which is better anyway. So it's I like it that you would just sit and listen instead of watching a screen anyway. Okay, this topic is called cause and effect parenting. In case you're wondering, and being raised Mormon, I'm the father of 10 wonderful children, speaking of them as their father. 6 boys and 4 girls, all born every odd year from 1971 through 1989. They're all out on their own now, and they're all doing fine. Before they got out on their own, I hadn't learned enough to teach them either right-minded thinking nor cause and effect parenting. However, both their mom and me, their dad, wanted nothing to do with traditional disciplining methods like discipline early, stick firmly to the rules, and punish consistently, which is the sad advice of a doctor of psychology, Jose Liba, who is superintendent of Isaac School District, Phoenix, Arizona, and by the way, has one of the worst records of student behavior of any district in the Phoenix metropolitan area. I'll talk more about my children when I write about my life goings-on in another topic. As you're hearing this part, please think firstly about a popular but unheeded writing about parenting called Children Learn What They Live by Dorothy Nolte. In part, she says, when children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. And to contrast that, when children live with acceptance, they learn to find love in the world. What do you want for your child? You probably heard those, haven't you? When children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. Believe me, I know that. And teaching them to choose the right, by the way, is putting your children in the atmosphere of criticism, where they learn to condemn, where they learn to judge. And the advice of Jesus is judge not. And again, to contrast that, when children live with acceptance, they learn to find love in the world. What do you want for your child? I think I know what you want for your child, and so you have to use cause and effect to affect what you want for your child. You have to accept them just as they were, are, and will be. The trouble with using such a welcoming parenting mode with children who have already been programmed with wrong-minded thinking, which includes pretty much all the children of the world, except for strictly raised Buddhists perhaps, is that they will have to realize that their first responses and first reactions will always be that of wrong-minded thinking, at least for a long time yet. And I'm speaking from a long 25 years of experience. And so they will judge, they will accuse, and they will use expectations of themselves and others when and as they think of themselves as victims way more often than what provides a peaceful and loving family. As for now, we learn what we teach, and we teach what we demonstrate, where our precious young ones most often learn from our own demonstrations. In another topic, I'll tell you why I don't think parents ought to raise their own children. Boy, that's going to piss you off, isn't it? I don't think parents ought to raise their own children, that is, unless they're able to teach and demonstrate both right-minded thinking and cause and effect parenting. So today's parents need to be taught this cause and effect parenting, or else they will mess up their children's lives with what is currently messing up all of our lives, wrong-minded thinking. Moving on, and secondly, both human behavior and human decision-making are effects, and they have their own real causes. Part of my problem in explaining things is that I have so much information in my mind that I want to share, but I get too wordy and I end up not making things as simple as they need to be, at least to be understood initially. So I'll try not to do that with this topic. Cause and effect parenting is the wonderful project of being on purpose. by aligning cause and effect to affect the behavior and decision making that both the growing child and the adult want for the child. I'm sure the greatest majority of parents will go along with the following way of thinking about the best interests of their child this way. I don't care what my growing child does for a living or how he or she lives their life, as long as they're happy and enjoying their life and not getting into trouble. If that isn't your way of thinking, then it sure as hell ought to be. So firstly, know this: neither we nor our children are really after certain arrangements of the conditions and events, but we are after the feelings we think we would have if we had those certain arrangements of the conditions and events in place. That is a gigantic misunderstanding on nearly everyone's part. It's easy for me because I realize that the real us is a mental being pretending to be a material being. And that's the basic of all of our problems, is that we're pretending to be what we're not. Anyway, and so it's much easier for me, to understand that we're after the feelings that we think we'll have if we had certain arrangements of the conditions and events in place. And little do we know that they don't provide that. There's no cause and effect there. In other words, we're really after our feelings and feeling experiences being certain better ways, and to avoid having our feeling experiences certain worse ways, at least unless we want to pretend certain feelings, as we most often do when we watch movies and such. Also know this: if there really were a boardwalk and a park place in some city that we could buy and rent out, as we pretend to do in the board game Monopoly, we wouldn't be rewarded anymore for being owners of what we think of as the real estate, as the real estate, than we could be when we pretend to own that real estate in the board game of Monopoly. I don't know if you got that or not. In other words, our mind doesn't know the difference. That's because anything and everything is exactly what we're making of it by interpreting it the way we choose to. The world is based in interpretation, or at least our social world is, while we believe it's based in fact, and that gets us in a hell of a trouble. In other words, boardwalk and park place, if we actually had the title and the deed to it, it's still, it doesn't affect us anyway. We're affected by our belief about it. And we, by the way, realize that the only time you can think that you're being rewarded is when you're thinking about it. You have to be thinking about something that you believe is rewarding you in order for you to believe that you're being rewarded by it. But you're not. You're being rewarded by your belief about it. You're rewarding belief about it. It's always that level shift in perception that we're missing out on. Thus, boardwalk and park place are both what we're making of them by interpreting them the way we choose to. In each case, we're only relating to our own defining mind contexts about them. We're relating to what they mean for us, and we're not relating to what they are. With that in mind, then also realize that quantum science tells us there are around 6 trillion energy exchanges per second happening within our neurological system. Each exchange is perfectly coordinated with each and every other exchange, and A Course in Miracles helps us understand how they're all orchestrated by how we are holding and slightly changing our body-oriented sense of self and sense of selves. In other words, and in meeting the world and our daily goings-on, we're coming from what we think we are, which is our self-image and our self-images, or our sense of self and our sense of selves. Here's how my main mentor puts it: every decision you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value you put upon yourself. What you think you are can be very hateful. And what this strange image makes you do, can be very destructive. And yet the destruction is no more real than the image is. The last portion of that quote is coming from the ultimate situation we're in anyway, that of not knowing what is real and what isn't real. The bottom line statement of A Course in Miracles is this: nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. At least it doesn't exist in reality, you know. And it goes on to say, herein lies the peace of God. In other words, the peace of God is the effect of knowing that nothing is real, at least here in time-space. You know, that's our way out of time-space, in fact. Remember how people were asking, why would young men murder and plunder and shoot up schools and theaters? What makes them do such crazy things? Well, now you know. Every decision you make stems from what you think you are and represents the value you put upon yourself. What you think you are can be very hateful. And what this strange image makes you do can be very destructive. You know, the guy that shot up the theater in Colorado, we already know he was afraid he was going to do something like that, and he told his therapist about it too. You know, that's a confused young man there. Well, hell, we're all confused because we're not using right-minded thinking. Anyway, more on that when I write about my own life goings on. Another subtopic here. The I am of us. That's what the subtopic is. The I am of us. And then the quote from the historical Jesus: as you believe, so shall it be done unto you. Or as you believe, so shall you experience what you're believing. You know, because you experience the mental aspect all the time. Know this: when a person gets a little angry and says, God damn it, I would have been slapped in the face, by the way, if I'd said that when I was a boy. It just was unheard of to say God damn it. Anyway, when someone says God damn it, just know that he or she is not taking the name of God in vain. Most religions have really missed the boat on that one. But when we think, say, or infer, I am stupid and ugly, or even I am bad, wrong, and unworthy to any degree at all, we are taking the name of the Lord our God in vain. Did you get that? But when we say, think, say, or infer, I am stupid and ugly, or even I am bad, wrong, and unworthy to any degree at all, we are taking the name of the Lord our God in vain. This is the cause and effect of our mind giving us the experience of our own belief systems. And know this, I'm off script here just one second. It isn't that we want to say I am stupid and ugly. It isn't that we want to say I am bad, wrong, and unworthy. But the truth, there's a truth that is within us, and it demands, that we know that we're bad, wrong, and unworthy. At least we know that from what other people tell us about ourselves. It isn't that we are, but we know that from what other people tell us, and so we believe that. This is the cause and effect of our mind giving us the experience of our own self-belief systems. When Moses asked the voice in the burning bush, who shall I say has sent me unto them? The voice answered, I am that I am. Tell them I am hath sent you unto them. And the Hebrew equivalent of the English I am is the name of a whole lot of people, is the name a whole lot of people give to their God, Yahweh. Yahweh, which means I am in English. That's the Hebrew equivalent of the English I am. So when Moses came down from the mount the second time, he brought down the 10 Commandments. Among them was at least one commandment that had a higher decadent to it. And that was the command, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That was the way Moses tried to at least initiate the truth that Jesus later taught. The kingdom of heaven is within you. The truth shall set you free. Therefore, you must be born again. That's the framework of the Gnostic Gospels, such as the Gospel of Thomas and the writings of Mary of Magdalene, that were left out of the canon during the time of Constantine. And the false gospel around the God of good and evil was put forth as the Bible, and that gave Constantine more control over the people. And so again, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, instructs us that we are inner guided and inner directed, and so our outer guidance and our outer direction becomes a huge impediment for our own mental and spiritual well-being. It's perfectly silly to believe that the real God has an ego, to where he or she gets angry if we mess around with that God's name. I am are creative words, where whatever follows those two words in the personal context, our sense of self is found projected into and experiencing through. That's, of course, the basic of the books like The Power of Positive Thinking. We're using the creative words I am to empower us in whatever it is that follows those two words. And we all know that works, at least to some extent, based on how consistent and persistent we are with those two words. But we also have within us the power of negative thinking as well, and we get pretty carried away in those kinds of scenarios. Parents often communicate to their children, you are being bad, but I want you to be good. Remember, I'm saying this is what they communicate. Parents communicate to their children, you are being bad, but I want you to be good. And more often we get the communications from our parents, you are good sometimes and bad sometimes. And we gain and maintain our sense of self. Remember that. We gain and maintain our sense of self and our sense of selves by what we're believing others are believing about us. By what we're believing others are believing about us. And that's from Charles Cooley. And most significantly, our parents, older siblings, and early teachers, especially our parents, are those who are in the parenting roles. Thus, and even though we most often wouldn't admit it around others, we then also believe, I am good sometimes and bad sometimes, and so it is. Think of it this way. As we're thinking so many situations around, I am good sometimes and bad sometimes, which is evident by our body's actions, those thoughts, as a collective, as though, go into the ethers and collect. Then our mind, knowing that we are a collective in reality, or as we think of it, we're all a part of each other, then or at least somehow we're all connected up with each other. So lots of people believe that. Then our mind takes it from there, and as though forces our bodies to act out according to our self-belief. Our self-belief systems, Let me do that again. Think of it this way. As we're thinking so many situations around I am good sometimes and bad sometimes, which is evident by our body's actions, those thoughts as a collective go into the ethers and collect. Then our mind, knowing that and by the way, we have a collective mind as well. We have our own portion of our mind, that we operate from individually, but there's a collective. That's what the atonement is, by the way. Two is the gathering together in one, all things in Christ, the way it talks about in the New Testament, and that means all of us. We're all a part of the oneness of life. And so then our mind, knowing that we are a collective in reality, or as we think of it, we're all a part of each other, then our mind takes it from there, and as though forces our bodies to act out according to our self-belief systems. I remember one of my boys, I was just kind of kidding around with him, and he was kind of like in his middle teens. Anyway, I was kidding around with him. I say, hey, just go and be bad or something. I can't remember how I was kidding around with him to be bad. I used to assign letters and emails to him, and I'd say, be bad, never do what you're told, and I'll be just fine. I was just trying to make a joke that way, and they knew it too. But anyway, my boy communicated back to me, no, that's not for me. And that, it really struck me when he was talking about that. In other words, that's not for him. And it's because he felt acceptable just the way he was. And that's the way my ex-wife, or their mother, and I taught them. We just kind of lived as a great big family. Anyway, so virtually all of us carry degrees of I am bad sometimes and good sometimes. Therefore, we have almost everyone running around acting bad sometimes and acting good sometimes. What neutralizes that is the self-belief and the truth, by the way. I am perfectly okay just the way I was, am, and will be. And that's the on-purpose, cause and effect parenting I'm talking about. I am perfectly okay just the way I was, am, and will be. And that's the on-purpose, cause and effect parenting I'm talking about. When we say, think, or infer, I am bad, wrong, and unworthy to any degree at all, it's as though our mind is concluding, I guess you, as an unbounded and unlimited being, want to play games where you pretend to be limited and bounded, and so I'll give you the experience of what you're believing or pretending, because that's my job, and I never fail in my job. That would be our mind speaking, So the greatest majority of us, by far, believes we are good sometimes and bad sometimes. And right there is our social world. Right there. It's the reflection of what's going on in our mind. That's our social world. So many of us, so confused as our mind, just like the director of a movie or a stage play, gives us our scripts as we act out our roles of being good sometimes and bad sometimes. As Shakespeare says, all the world is a stage and we're merely actors upon the stage. Even the best people, even the people we regard highly, express an experience in what we think of as inappropriate ways, at least from time to time. And they know a lot more about themselves than we know about them in a lot of these kinds of cases. And we also know that the worst people among us, as we suppose, often have tender and warm feelings and experiences towards certain other people they like. All this bullshit comes from the God of good and evil that Lucifer invented when he lied and told Adam and Eve, you must eat of this mind fruit, so that you will be like God, knowing good and evil. That serpent, that slimy, sleazy, slithering bastard, really screwed things up for us. And we're still all falling for it, apparently some 5,000 years later. Carl Rogers' insight on personality demonstrates that he knew cause and effect parenting, or that relationship there, when he said, unconditional positive self-regard facilitates congruence, and congruence is necessary for being a fully functioning person. Think about it. Unconditional positive self-regard. Who has that? Who is ever lucky enough to grow up with unconditional positive self-regard? But Carl Rogers tells us an unconditional positive self-regard facilitates congruence, and congruence is necessary for being a fully functioning person. It's necessary to be true to ourselves. We have to be true to ourselves because the truth about us is within our mind, and our mind is currently split. We're suffering from a split mind. In the same general way, our mind splits again when we night dream. There, in our night dreams, we are twice removed from our own reality. Therefore, at least for now, in time-space, we're looking for what my main mentor calls a happier dream. Course in Miracles calls it a happier dream. It isn't to go to heaven or anything else, because for right now, we're looking for a happier dream. And the reason is again, as I told you before, we're all a part of each other, and so until we understand that would be the next move when we have the happier dream, is to realize and recognize our part in each other, the reality in each one of us. And this happier dream comes in an automatic way when we program next generations, when we program our precious children with the truth about them, by parenting with, I like you and I love you just the way you were, are, and will be, which provides the scripts for them, for us, and for them. You are perfectly okay just the way you were, are, and will be, as our mind, even as though forces us to act according to what our society thinks of as behavior that is acceptable, okay, and appropriate. You see, it just happens in an automatic way, just like I was telling you about my son. I was telling him to be bad, and he says, no, that's not for me. Don't communicate to your child that they are a good child and not a bad child. Neither one. Don't communicate either one of those to them, because that polarizes their mind, or it continues to polarize their mind. I better say it that way. Because that polarizes their mind just as almost everyone's mind is currently polarized. And they, again, through good and evil, right and wrong, as I told you, that snaky, slithering bastard Lucifer brought that into the world, at least the way we think of it through the Bible. And they end up judging, and when they have that polarity in their mind, they end up judging others, which is really self-judgment through cause and effect. And more, and besides that, nobody knows what good behavior or bad behavior is anyway. We know what violent behavior is, and we know what certain behaviors are, where the care and keeping of bodies is the issue. But the people, things, conditions, and events of our lives cannot be measured except through interpretation. Did you get that? The people, things, conditions, and events of our lives can only be measured through interpretation, which means whatever arrangements there are of those, they can't matter anyway, except again when the care and keeping of bodies is the issue. Believing we have some kind of sureness or some kind of hold on what is good behavior and what is bad behavior is where we get in so much trouble as a society. And yet where accepting others just as they are will be the key to saving ourselves from ourselves if we succeed in that. And I want to just give you a quote off the script here. My favorite quote in A Course in Miracles: what could you not accept if you only knew that everything that happens, past, present, and yet to come, is gently planned by one whose whole purpose is your good? That's such a wonderful, insightful statement to me. What could you not accept if you only knew that everything that happens, past, present, and yet to come, is gently planned by one whose whole purpose is your good? And what that is, there is A Course in Miracles way of talking about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's part of God, you could say it that way, or the spirit of the wholeness, you know. Anyway, I need to conclude this. If you claim to trust in God, then trust in using cause and effect parenting, and you'll be giving your precious children the greatest gift they could get, at least in time-space, and they'll never quit thanking you for it when they realize what a blessing it is. But as I mentioned at first, all of us have the very heavy burden of wrong-minded thinking to wade through and throw away so that we can use that mind space for right-minded thinking. And I was talking to you about bullying. That's the topic that helps you understand how you teach right-minded thinking. Speaking from the 25 years I've been passionately studying these things, I have had one hell of a time as I have agonized and anguished with my first responses and first reactions. Your children and you will have similar degrees of anguish and agony as you fight through the ever so deeply impacting of wrong-minded thinking. I see this as projects using school boards, where parents get directly involved in helping this magnificent and grand effort. I hope to initiate right-minded thinking with school boards, at least at first, and believe it or not, it will only be a matter of everyone being honest and responsible, or refusing to be honest and responsible, which is what nearly all parents are unconsciously conspired in at the present time. What I'm saying is that, by God, either you're telling the truth or you're not telling the truth to your child. And that's what I'm telling you. It isn't like an option. It isn't like, well, why don't you believe this instead of believing that? It's not that at all. When the truth is staring you in the face, either you accept the truth or you're a goddamn lying bastard. And anyway, I need to stop this. And thanks a lot for listening to this, and there will be at least one or two more.